listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hey, what's up out there? Hope you're all doing well, and thanks for checking out my Straight to Video podcast. Yes, this is still me, Rob Lane, as your host, even though today my voice sounds nothing like me, as I'm nursing a big old head cold, but we're still here as normal. As we head into the last month of the year, there's all the year-end lists cropping up, and one that's always interesting is the Spotify Rap charts. I know a lot of you share those to show what you've been listening to each year, but it's incredibly interesting for podcasters, and you can see what kind of year you've had and how your show is going. Happy to report that this year has seen more growth in this show thanks to you all listening, and we've had almost 30% more followers than last year, which is super encouraging. And that's just on Spotify, let alone all the other podcast platforms, so thank you for real. On today's show, I'm super buzzed to bring you a chat with drummer Lee Murray. Many of you out there will remember Lee from 90s chart toppers and awesome pop rock band Let Loose. You know, Crazy For You, 17, One Night Stand, all those great songs which for me were something of a lifeline when quality pop rock tunes were hard to find in the mid-90s. Everyone was either still in grunge mode, heading into Britpop territory, or throwaway pop and dance tunes. Then here comes a band with more in common to great artists like Duran Duran and Nick Kershaw. I was all in, and they soon became one of my favourite bands. Next year sees the 30th anniversary of the band's biggest hit single, Crazy For You, which hit the number 2 spot, only held off by one of the biggest number 1s of all time, Wet Wet Wet's Love Is All Around. Crazy For You was officially certified gold status, selling around 500,000 copies, but I've heard since it was a lot more. Imagine that, all those people actually going out to the shops to buy the song on vinyl, cassette or CD long before you could simply click a button and hear it on your phone. Today, 30 years later, it still sounds as fresh and summery as it ever did. 2023 has seen Lee and Let Loose come back with a brand new lineup. Some will notice the absence of frontman Richie Wermelin, who took a step away from music to concentrate on other creative journeys, and in steps former Bad Boys Inc. frontman Matthew James Pateman to join Lee and original guitarist Rob Jeffrey. The band have released a new single, If the World Was Ending, and are currently booking live shows for 2024. We chat all about this new chapter of the band before diving back into the early days of Let Loose, the rollercoaster journey through 90s pop and their hit singles, working with Nick Kershaw along with the struggles Lee had towards the end of the band's initial run. We also chat about how today he teaches drums, which has opened up so many new doors for him. This Straight to Video podcast is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo, an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for graphic design the past couple of years. It's used to create the podcast episode artwork you see each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market, so please check them out at affinity.serif.com. Alright, let's get into this new episode. If you want to keep up to date with all things Let Loose, then everything you need, including their social media links, can be found at letlooseofficial.com. And if you want to know more about Lee's drum teaching, then hunt him down at leedrumhub.com. But right now, please enjoy my straight to video chat with Let Loose drummer Lee Murray.
Hello, mate.
How you doing?
Good. Can you hear me?
I can. I've got you loud and clear.
Wow, I got it right. That's a first.
So how's things?
Yeah, it's good, actually, mate. You know, it's really busy, but it's good. You know, it's a lot. It's funny when you've got, like back in the day, we had obviously record companies doing stuff for you or on your behalf. So it's a bit kind of stressful in a way because we're doing it all ourselves. It's a lot of work, but, things seem to be going in the right direction. So it's all right,
Sweet, man. No, I'm excited just to see everything happening. It just looks great.
Oh, thanks, man.
How was the gig the other week? It was short and sweet, I think. What was it, like 5 songs?
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. I mean, we've got this camera crews following us around. So everything seems to so full on at the moment. Everything goes at 100 miles an hour. But it was good, for the first one back. It went down well, everything sort of worked. And yeah, it was all right.
Was you nervous?
I was crapping it. Rob wasn't at all, and I don't think Matt was. The thing is, I've got a new kit, and I'd never played it live, obviously. I go on there, and I'm just hoping that everything works, because I've got this low sort of embarrassment threshold. So if anything really screws up, I'm like, oh, man. But it was all right, it went down all right.
So at the risk of making you, me, and everyone listening feel really old, As you probably know, next year, 2024, is 30 years since the massive success of Crazy For You, which dominated the summer of 94. To put that in perspective, that would be like us talking back then about a song that was released back in 1964.
No.
Like the Beatles or the Stones.
No.
That's the thing that really blows my mind. And I don't know if that's because it's time moving too fast these days or things just moving a little slower. Because in my head, the changes and styles in music from the 60s to the 90s, it was insanely bigger than from the 90s to today.
Yeah.
It's bonkers. It really is.
It is bonkers, but I suppose it's that kind of adage that, the older you get, the quicker life goes. I mean, when I was 15, 16 and I was in sort of bands and that, local bands and whatever, it was dragged, didn't it? From one year to the next, you were thinking, I can't wait to leave school and I can't wait to sort of, either play music all the time, try and do it for a living. But now everything is just 5 times as quick.
It's weird though, because it's like back in like the 80s and 90s, if a band didn't release an album in 2 or 3 years, you're like, oh God, it's been forever since they released an album. But now some bands don't release anything for like 7 or 8 years. My gauge for this is when I got into like hard rock or in like late 80s, early 90s, Motley Crue released an album called The Decade of Decadence.
Yeah.
This like best of album, it spanned 10 years, like 1980 to 1990 or 81 to 91.
Yeah.
And this band went through about 10 different changes in that time period.
Yeah.
Now, those 10 years just go in a snap.
I know. They go in a flash. And I think, I dread to think about the next 10 years. I'm going to be like a fossil. I'll probably still be doing this.
I think there really was some magic in the air back then for some reason. I'm not sure what, but you even said with the success of the single, it was on its second release. You'd gone through several remixes of the songs, but it was just as much about the timing as well.
Yeah.
You just have to look at some of the YouTube comments, though, on the video, and people regularly mention Summer of 94. That song seems to have really put a stamp on that time period.
That year, yeah. It's a funny one, isn't it? I think, a lot of it is timing. I mean, there probably wasn't that much difference between, 93 and 94, really. It's the space of 12 months. I do, on the odd occasion, dwell on what was it that made the planets align to make that song really kind of connect with people. But I think it was not just that. I think it was 4 Weddings and a Funeral.
Right.
I mean, that summer even without our record, I still think it would have been one of those really memorable. When I was a kid, it was 1976 or 77, that amazing summer that we had. I remember it as a kid, we have them all the time now, but back then it was almost like a one-off. It's ingrained in my mind, that summer. And it's the same sort of thing with 94. That's the feedback and whatever that I hear about people when they talk about that period when 4 Weddings came out, obviously the Wet, Wet, Wet song and Our sort of talked about in amongst it. And I love it, just to be amongst that, even in a small way, is amazing.
I do want to talk a little more about the impact of the song, but there's so much other cool stuff I'd love to pick your brain about. But here we are, 30 years after its release, and there's a buzz of activity in the Let Loose world. I was part of the reunion you did with Richie back in 2011, I think it was. But this time, the press really seemed to have jumped on the new announcement. Again, is it just timing, do you think? Are people gravitating now towards 90s nostalgia as much as 80s nostalgia?
I think that's probably true, yeah. Maybe that's part of it. I mean, there was a whole period where there was a lot of 80s tours. I mean, there still are, but, they seem to be launching all over the place, all through the last 10 years and so on. Maybe go back even a little bit further than that. It was all about the 80s. But I think our audience has probably grown up now to a point where maybe their kids are a little bit older. They might be in their 40s. So they're looking at reflecting on what it's like when they were the same sort of age that their kids were, what they were listening to and so on. Nostalgia goes in sort of cycles, doesn't it? I know the 70s was, when I was a kid, it was the 70s sort of circuit. So I remember my parents going to see these bands and thinking, oh, it's all sort of prehistoric. I couldn't relate to it at all. But I really could relate, obviously, to the 80s. Because that was my decade when I was growing up. So it was great to see some of these bands, out there playing again. So, yeah, I suppose it's just the turn of the 90s. But in terms of traction with the press, it's just been amazing. It really has, and sort of happened organically. And the support's been good. I think all of us were a little bit nervous about how we'd be received, obviously, with Richie retiring and sort of doing his own thing. And I think he's painting and, he's got his own little thing on the go and he's sort of said, no, it's not for me. So, I mean, it compounded with Matt, coming in, and I thought, how is all this going to be received? But it's been pretty good, it's been all right.
We kind of got an inkling of a reunion was going on, and we was like, who's going to be singing, when it was just like you and Rob on the images. And I even mentioned to you, like, where you going to front the band? You had your solo single, Rust, a while ago, and I immediately thought thought that would have been a good way for the fan base to accept this new version of the band. But with Matthew on board through being in Bad Boys Inc., I thought that was a great idea, and the response it's just been super overwhelming.
Yeah, I read a couple of comments about me singing. I mean, there's just no. I mean, Richie's got this incredible range to his voice. There's no way I could ever do Crazy for You any justice. You know, I mean, I kind of squawked my way through Rust. I mean, I wrote that well within the parameters of my own voice. You know, it's not a stretch at all. To be honest, anyone could sing it. But when it comes to Crazy for You and some of the other songs, there's just no way I could. There's no way I could do it. So, I mean, I've known Matt for a long time. Actually, he was really underused in his band. Really good writer. He's a great singer, and we really get on just incredibly well. And he can really sing the songs. His range is sort of equal to Rich. He can really hit some of those high notes and so on. And yeah, it was a shoo-in. It was a real no-brainer. So, you know, here we are.
Was there a point though when Richie said he didn't want to do it where you thought like, holy shit, did that initially put the brakes on? Because I mean, Richie's image, the tone of his voice, it was very much a part of like the Let Loose sound.
Oh, massively. Yeah. You know, you can argue that it was his band, I suppose. You know, I mean, everything, it's like Bon Jovi, isn't it? You know, they're the absolute focal point, understandably. You know, I'm just a drummer, and then we have Rob who's the guitarist. I mean, yeah, I do get that. People say, but this was real. I mean, especially because he wrote Crazy for You, right? So that was all a worry. All of that was on my mind. We talked about it over about a year because we were offered stuff ages ago, well, about, a year ago. And someone said, look, you should do these 90s shows. And Rich was like, I don't know whether I want to go through that again. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. I completely understand it. Something else happened further down the line and they offered us a bit more money. And I said, Rich, look, there's this on the table now. What do you think? And he was just like, no, I'm just done. He's just done. And you've got to respect it. You absolutely have to respect it. So I just parked it. I just thought, well, that's the end of that. And then Rob got in touch. And I hadn't spoken to Rob at the time. I hadn't spoken to him for years and years. So he just out of the blue, he went, hello, Lee. I was like, hello, Rob. Yeah, literally, I was like, my God. And he said, look, I'm getting out of the corporate world and I'm picking up my guitar. Do you want to do anything? So at that point, we just thought, okay, we're just going to play in a pub. I'm going to dig out, dust off the kit, and we're just literally going to set up in the Slug and Lettuce down the road and just for the sake of playing. And, God knows what's happened. But between that point and now, we have a new singer, we have a record out, we have an agent, we have press people. I don't know how it's happened.
Timing, mate. It's timing.
Yeah, maybe.
The fan base for Let Loose, it's always been very close-knit. And I think a lot of people knew that Richie had took a step back from everything as well. So that's probably another reason why they've been so open and so supportive of Matt coming on board as well. There's it keeps the songs alive at the end of the day.
Yeah, maybe there's a bit of that. I don't know, really. I think, do I spend time sort of deconstructing it all and thinking, okay, why and what's it all about? And I'm just sort of embracing it and we're going chugging along on the ride, really. I mean, we're incredibly grateful that people have embraced it. 99% of, I had a few messages where people have said, I'm not sure about this. I don't think I can get behind it. I completely understand. It's not a problem because it kind of, maybe for some people, it upsets the whole kind of memory of us being, Richie, Rob and Lee. I get it, completely get it, but it's not that important. It's just pop music and people have, to a large degree, they're coming to the gigs. And we're just going to try and do it justice and keep the memory alive and just, bimble along, really.
Speaking of fans, I've encountered a lot of really cool, devoted fan bases when I've had the chance to tour with other bands. The Wild Arts, The Alarm. But Let Loose fans, they all seem to share this bond with each other. You've known a lot of them since they were teenagers and now they've all grown up with kids of their own, but still love this band so much. You must have had a real fan-friendly band back in the day to earn that bond.
I think we were always, I think so. I mean, we were always, I keep saying it sort of ad nauseum, but we were just always very, very grateful for people that turn up. It always played on our minds. I think people have come to see us. They've turned up at the BBC, they've turned up at gigs, at airports to see us off. They never, ever, just all the time.
How did they find that out back then?
I don't know. To this day, I don't know. I think maybe there was someone knew at the record company, but they knew what we were doing before we did. And it was just mad. So it was always at the back of our mind that we were thinking, the fans are the lifeblood of what you do in a band. They go out and they support you and they buy the records and they come and see you in concerts and so on. Personally, for me anyway, that's never left me. It's honestly never left me. So I'm always at pains to now and again do a little thing in the car when I'm traveling somewhere to say, thanks so much. It's always appreciated that you're there. I don't know what numbers they are. you never really know. We're obviously trying to grow our audience with new songs and things like that. But for the core fan base that's there, we'll always be grateful.
How was it for you getting back in a room with Rob after all these years?
He's not changed at all. His hair's got a bit shorter. He wears a kilt now. So, I don't know, go figure. It's just Rob. He's pretty much the same. He just lives with his guitar. That's all he cares about. But he's been really good because he's had this period of time in the corporate world. He's actually really good at talking to people that I'm not so good at, sort of organising stuff and, agents and all that. He's really good at all that sort of stuff. Matt's been really good at some of the organising some of the socials and, the signs and the Let Loose logos and all that. He's really good at all that. Sort of sit behind the drums and tinker around with some songs and all that sort of thing, so less adept at all that stuff that they do.
To throw things back a little, never been able to find much information out there about the early days of the band, and it's always interested me how things happened. I do know that you and Richie, I think you met like in the late 80s and you answered an ad in Melody Maker.
Yeah.
Do you recall what the ad said?
Yeah, it was a weird advert, and I'd answered another advert for another band, and I was that close to getting into that band. They'd sent me all their material. We were chatting, and I really loved their songs. And I noticed Richie's advert in the Melody Maker, but it said we want 2 drummers, 2 guitarists, 2 bass players. I thought, what's that about? But I thought, all right, it was in East London. So my dad I was only 16, maybe, I think it was 16. So I jumped in my dad's car. He took me all the way down to Bethnal Green from Watford in rush hour. Went up to Richie's flat and met him. And I just thought he looked really, really good. He looked like a star, my sort of image of a front man.
What was his hair like back then?
It was all kind of like a bit like Japan. Do you remember the band Japan? It was all like a flick and it was all lacquered and, sort of Durrani. We were proper 80s. I mean, seriously, he had these little kind of pixie boots on and I did. We just looked very sort of similar. He had better hair than me. But anyway, and I thought he looks really good. And he played me a song and I thought, I like some of these. But yeah, the weird thing that put me off is that he wanted 2 drummers.
Was that Adamant thing or something?
No, I don't think so. I think they had this kind of concept that they wanted to do such a sort of varied type of music. They wanted to do pop. And then he said, if we want to go and do reggae, we can get another drummer in to do the reggae stuff. And I was like, I'm not feeling that at all. So that put me off a little bit. But anyway, so it was between that and the other band that I was really into. And it was almost like that. Which one do I want? Which one should I go for? And anyway, so Richie held these sort of auditions and that down in a studio in Holloway. And he sort of said, do you want to join me? Do you want to crack on? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And that was it. By that time, I was about 17, so I was driving. So that's how that sort of came about.
Did you click on any specific bands? I know you've always been like a big Gary Newman fan. I think it was his drummer. Was it Cedric Sharpley, I believe?
Cedric, yeah.
Caught your eye as a drummer.
Yeah.
Where was Richie coming from at the time and where did you kind of meet in the middle?
No, not Gary Newman. I can promise you that much. I mean, he had a pretty extensive record collection, proper vinyl collection. It was pretty eclectic. It went from sort of Michael Jackson to Nick Kershaw, funnily enough. There was lots of Duran in there, Spandau and all that. He really immersed himself in all the 80s stuff and a massive Beatles fan. So, pretty eclectic. And I appreciated that. I just like pop music. I do like very, very sort of dark electronic music as well. Probably personally, I lean towards stuff that's probably a little bit rockier and darker. But I'd also love a pop song. So, it's a weird kind of contradiction there. But yeah, so, he certainly didn't have any Gary Newman. Funnily enough, when I went down there, I was a bit worried because I had going to a Gary Newman concert that evening. I think it was 1989. So I went all the way down to see him. And I was thinking, he's going to keep me here. And he's not going to think I'm keen enough because I've got to go. Because I'm going to be late for this concert at Hammersmith Odeon. Anyway, it worked out all right because he said, right, I'm off to see my girlfriend. And he elbowed me out the door.
Oh, man.
Yeah, charming. Yeah.
What was the gig like?
It was always good in those days. Just Gary Newman was very good at massive light shows. And it was always a real kind of epic experience. But that was when I was probably sort of getting more into my own career. And I kind of drifted away from going to see him that much. And then I sort of embraced a lot of other types of music. So,
what was your first gig that you actually went to see? Do you remember?
It was either Queen or it was Newman. And I went to see Gary when I was in about 1983, so I would have been about 13. But I also saw Queen and saw In Excess. A lot of those early gigs at Wembley. I think In Excess was supporting Queen, but that might have been about 85. So I was a little bit older. So around that period, I saw the Stones. Yeah, some really, really big bands. Yeah. I mean, seeing Queen was fantastic, amazing.
Did you ever meet Cedric Sharpley, Newman's drummer?
No, I wasn't one to hang around outside. I was too young, really. So from the age of 13, 14, when he was still really big. So I was only just allowed to go to gigs. So no, I didn't sort of hang around backstage and that because my mum was used to pick me up, and say, right, we're off. So I was disappointed with that. I'd love to have met him. I mean, further down the line, I met Gary because we did a gig with him, and he wasn't his drummer anymore, and he's passed away now.
What was the band name you originally went out with, you and Richie? Because you were in a band called Distant Voices, I believe.
Yeah.
What was Let Loose's original name?
Licks. LYX. Yeah.
Oh, no, I had to get the X in there.
I had to get the X. Yeah,
Not a double X.
LYX. I don't know where that came from. I really don't know where that came from. We were just trying to figure out. We were signed, that was just prior to signing to Virgin Records or Siren Records. It was part of Virgin. And I think it was then, probably when we signed, that we dug up another, I don't know, I can't even remember where it came from.
What was the logo like? Who did the logo originally?
For LYX, probably Richie. Yeah, he probably came up with something. Yeah. Gosh. There's tapes actually kicking around with LYX written on it, and yeah, there's all sorts of stuff kicking around.
What was the first steps you both took? Was it initially writing songs together, or did you seek out other musicians? Was there like a game plan?
So the actual room that we got signed in was called 313 in Holloway Road. So we rehearsed there as LYX or Licks or whatever it was, auditioning other guitarists and various other people. We never really found anyone that really kind of clicked. Richie and I really sort of clicked at that point, although we were always kind of, I don't know, I don't know how you describe it really. There was a lot of friction, I think, even though we were mates. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's usually what makes a band work.
Yeah, maybe.
The end result, it needs that friction to make that electricity.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I think it gets a bit kind of too much and it takes over and it becomes a bit toxic, which is, what happened. Yeah, no, maybe at the time it was a good thing. So no, we just spent time. I mean, Richie had a lot of songs, so I was trying to sort of develop my own songwriting, which took time, took a lot of time because I had ambitions to try and, write as much as possible and bought studios at home. But Richie had such a lot of songs and so on that sometimes we'd get involved and I'd write some lyrics and a few melodies, and there was a few on that first album that I was involved with and so on. But the juggernaut started when he sort of wrote Crazy for You, and record companies really sort of think, right, he's got to write another one. So they really concentrate on the writer that's come up with the big hit.
A few months ago, there's some amazing full band rehearsal footage surface online, which sounded amazing. I think Richie had crazy hair in it.
That was what he looked like. That's it. Yeah, that's what he looked like when I met him. Yeah, he had those little bolero sort of coats on and whatever. That was probably 80, maybe 90, maybe 89, 90. Must have been when we signed, because I had this ridiculous drum kit that the record company bought me.
Right. So when did you hook up with Rob on guitar and people like Ed Poole on bass?
Well, I've known Ed since I was 13.
No way.
Yeah. He worked in my local drum guitar music shop, and I always thought he was amazing. He was in a band that supported Level 42, Sticky Stuff. I always thought he was amazing. He was an incredible player, still is.
He's phenomenal.
He's just crazy good. And I actually thought one day I want him to play on one of my records, because I was just blinking thinking I'm going to make it, and that's it. That's the end of it. Stupidly, because you never know which way your life's going to go. But, thankfully, we did. And I got him, I called him up and I said, look, we've been signed. Can you come and play on our album? So we had him, we had Gary Tibbs from Adam and the Ants, because Ed couldn't come at one point. So I used to love Adam and the Ants. And Gary Tibbs pitched up. He also played for Brian Ferry. He was in with Brian Ferry at one point as well. So another complete hero. So, yeah, that became sort of full circle.
Wow, I didn't realise you and Ed went back that far.
Yeah, so even younger, maybe, because he knew my mum. My mum used to take me into this place called drums and my sticks and everything else. And he was there with his mullet. Fantastic. Proper deluxe mullet.
Deluxe.
Yeah, the deluxe mullet. I can't remember whether it was straight at the back or curly. It's usually curly that's the deluxe version. It might have been straight. I think he's cut it off now, which is sad.
Because I remember Richie, I don't know what it was. We were talking one time and I think we got onto the subject of Ed. It was like, oh, he used to play in this rock band, and it got to the point, it was like, oh, it's Romeo's Daughter. Do you know Romeo's Daughter? I'm like, holy shit. Romeo's Daughter were kind of like one of my gateway bands into hard rock.
Seriously, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because I used to get a big horror fan, so I always used to buy the soundtracks. And Romeo's Daughter had the lead single on A Nightmare on Elm Street 5.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, so I kind of obsessed over this song, and it's still one of my favourite songs to this day.
Oh, man, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't know whether he still does. I think he dabbled, he went back, maybe this is probably, how quick time goes, as we were saying. Could even be 10 years ago. He was back in Romeo's Daughter doing some new stuff. But now we just chat sort of online. I haven't seen him in a long time because he's just touring all the time.
He's always out with Bonnie Tyler, isn't he?
Oh, man, he's never at home. So poor Jill, his wife. No, she's fine. Yeah, but I love him. He's a great guy.
You mentioned earlier you initially signed a deal with Virgin Records, and I think you spent a couple of years recording an album which was shelved when that division of the label collapsed. What was that album like? Was it like the Let Loose we got to know?
Kind of. I think it was pretty crazy for you. So I'm trying to think if there was anything that we recorded that would have ended up on. Yeah. So I believe it was quite a poppy song that was on the first album. There's an incarnation of that was recorded on the Siren album. So we changed and messed about with that, and it developed into something for the Let Loose album. So there's probably one or two that were rewritten and sort of jigged about, but nothing was really kept, I don't think, other than that. But we went into some incredibly expensive studios, one of which was Townhouse, where Phil Collins recorded that In the Air Tonight in this stone drum room. And again, it was just, I mean, I was 18, whatever it was, 19. Just the most amazing experience to be in the room where these pop stars were just... Jane Seymour came in at one point.
Wow.
Jane Seymour walked in the studio and we were like... Because I think she just knew I can't remember either the tape op or the producer. And she just walked in and we were like, that's Jane Seymour just walked in.
Mate, she's still smoking now, so what she looked like in like 89, 90.
Yeah. And we had loads of that. And we worked in Metropolis and Kim Wilde just walked in. And I used to love Kim. I mean, all of us did as like teenage boys. She just walked in looking absolutely incredible. Like it was as an 18, 19-year-old kid, it was really incredible. Just amazing time. And actually, Queen were recording Innuendo in the studio at the same time. So, you know, I brought my drumsticks at one point and the tape op went downstairs and nicked a couple of Roger Taylor's and it had his name on them. And I thought, I've made it. I've got Roger Taylor's drumsticks. So, I mean, really exciting times because I was so young.
Who was producing that album?
So there was a guy that had something to do with, it was Pete DeAngelis, if I remember that name correctly, and Pete Schweer. So Pete Schweer had dealings with, I think he recorded Rio and Seven and the Ragged Tiger for Duran, engineered it, something like that, and they just got together to be a production team. I think George DeAngelis had come from PWL, so they sort of came together to record a Mel and Kim album and various other bits and pieces. So yeah, they were involved in that. But it was kind of taking us down the wrong road, really. We'd have really loved the Duran Duran route, but it was more kind of PWL. And at that point, like you were suggesting, the record company was kind of imploding. So, yeah, it sort of didn't amount to anything.
When that deal fell through, you must have all been crushed.
Oh, terrible. We went back on the dole.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you imagine, this was back in the day when they used to give you a fortune in advances. I went into a drum shop in, can't remember where it was, and that was Holloway as well. Bought the most expensive drum kit you could ever lay your hands on. The most expensive cymbals. And they were just saying, just get what you want. I mean, this drum kit was thousands of pounds. It's in that footage that you were talking about, this Tama kit, right? I mean, it was just ridiculous. Then we got dropped. So I was just left with all this. I mean, even the boys got amazing guitars and amps and things like that. Never happen these days. Record companies don't have that kind of money. Or if they do, they don't give it to their artists. So yes, but yeah, we went back on the dole. We just went back on the dole and started writing again.
Is there an element of embarrassment if that happens, when you get signed and then all of a sudden, oh, what's Lee doing these days? Oh, he got dropped from his label.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. I mean, thank God we never actually released anything. I think that was probably, you know, a good thing. I think that would have compounded it and made it even worse. You know, if you're out there and you're promoting it, maybe you would have got on telly and radio and then would have been dropped. That sort of thing could have happened. So perhaps our profile could have been up there. So that drop would have been probably even more painful.
Right.
But I think that is the point where a lot of bands give up. If they get signed and then they get dropped, they probably think, okay, we've had a go. Let's just call it a day.
You never expect that one shot, let alone a second shot.
No, to try and get a record deal in those days was just, as it is now, you know, it's just impossible. So, yeah, we did kind of think, you know, but no, we were just so focused on we're just going to keep going and keep going. Yeah, and then maybe, I don't know how long it was between that and Phonogram. It didn't seem like that long. Maybe it was a year. Must have been a bit more, 92, 93 maybe.
The band was always marketed as a three-piece. Was that always the plan, or was that a record company decision?
No, I think it was just a question of like going back to what I said earlier about trying to find people that really fitted in. Quite often we had other people that came in and out, sort of session players that they wanted quite a big chunk of money and none of us had any money. You know, as I say, I mean, Ed was involved quite a bit.
I say he's on most of them Top of the Pops appearances.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's on those. He was never holding us to money. I mean, he was brilliant. We didn't get paid at one point when we were rehearsing. The record company didn't pay us. He's always been amazing. But he went off to do his tours when we got dropped. And, you know, so he came back and did some of the Top of the Pop stuff. But no, in the end, it was just, let's just go with the three of us.
Even though you got that second record deal, it wasn't all plain sailing. You had several releases. Crazy for You came out a couple of times, but it was the remix version with a new video that burst through. The original version, it doesn't have the iconic piano intro right at the beginning. Whose idea was it to drop that at the beginning?
That was the A&R guy.
Wow.
The A&R guy called Alan Pell. So that was also painful. That whole period was really painful. Again, this is going back when record companies gave you a few shots. You wouldn't get that now. It's one and you're off if it's not a hit. So they were chucking money at us, to be fair to them. And actually, the record company were amazing. The TV department, nobody gave up, until we actually got some traction with that. So, yeah, the first one did, with the rap at the beginning, that didn't happen. Again, you were talking about timing. Maybe it was that. Maybe it was a lot. The mix was quite ploddy on that version. Yeah, so we actually went back in the studio and did it ourselves, just remixed it ourselves. Richie came up with the idea of speeding it up, which was a good idea. Rob changed a little bit of the guitar, put some wah-wah on it, and we just reduced the big heavy drums down a little bit and pulled the loops up and anyway, all that sort of thing. And then, yeah, the record company guy said, stick the piano on at the beginning. We were like, really? We quite like the rap. He was going, no, trust me, put the piano on. So, yeah, it was his idea.
Was you all on board when you heard it?
We were sick to death of it, I promise you that. Sick to death. You think about the best song you've ever heard in your life. If you hear it 10,000 times, trying to get it right in the studio again and again, we were absolutely sick of it. And you lose track completely on whether it's good or not. You've just got no clue. So you need other people to say, that's the one, or it's not, because you just don't know. You hear it so many times, you just think, I've no idea. I've no idea whether this is any good or not.
It totally put the stamp on it, though. It made it instant.
The piano. Yeah, I think it did as well.
Was there a point when you were all like, okay, time to hold on tight, this is about to explode? Was it when Crazy hit the top 40, the first time on Top of the Pops, Radio 1? Do you remember when you knew everything was about to change?
A lot of people talk about that. They knew they'd kind of made it. And I don't really know. I remember feeling amazing when we did Top of the Pops because suddenly we were in amongst all these incredibly big, successful acts. Mariah Carey. We were there, I think, when Oasis just sort of came up. So we were on a stage and they were over there. Top of the Pops, a tiny studio, really, really tiny. So you're here literally across there is the other stage. So you're waiting while that band finishes and the presenter's going, hey, getting the crowd to go, it's Oasis, and da-da-da. You're there waiting to start. So then they shepherd the crowd over to your stage. So there was Oasis there, and then I think it was Julian Cope was on the same sort of time as us on our first one. He was over there.
You had The Grid on the same one as you did Swamp Thing.
The Grid, yeah, Swamp Thing. Yeah, that was brilliant. Yeah, so, at that point, I thought, I'd watched Top of the Pops since I was 8 or 9, and suddenly all of us were there. It was a real pinch me moment. But we never, because we were sort of working so hard, I don't think we ever sort of had time to think, this is what's happening to us, because it was just constant. The schedules were insane.
Was the schedule already busy?
Oh, man. Trying to work that single, we didn't sleep. Now, obviously, you get probably an email of all your activities from your record company about what you're doing. Then they used to post it to you. So it'd come through the letterbox and it'd be about, that thick about all your activities. You think, I haven't got a day off for about 4 months. And it was radio early in the morning, go into a school to do like a couple of numbers. And then it'd be, I don't know, HMV to do a signing, depending on what was out, single or album. Relentless. And then you'd fly somewhere in the afternoon to Finland and do it all again and then come back. And the next day would be the same, but then you'd go to Germany. I mean, it is that relentless. So you just don't have time to think of anything, really.
17 was the follow-up single, which you'd worked on with Nick Kershaw. How did Nick get involved?
So, again, because Richie wrote Crazy for You, he was the main writer, they started to sort of, they just want another Crazy for You, just write another one. And you think, well, if the planets align, then perhaps we will write another one. Who knows? It's unpredictable. And they were like, well, let's get you to write with a few people. So we just met Nick. Richie was a big fan of Nick Kershaw. I love Nick Kershaw as well. So to be honest, that's pretty much a Nick Kershaw song. If you think of the chords, they're pretty similar to the one and only, right?
Well, I think when I first started playing it with Richie, or when we first started working it up, I asked him, what is it that's the special sauce in this song? What is it? Because even Richie said, the songs are pretty simple. They're like GCD or whatever, stuff like that. He said, but Nick could come in and he just added all these like cool variations to these chords, and it just really made your ears sit up.
Yeah, and it's not like, 8-bar verse and then like a, I don't know, 2-bar or 4-bar bridge and then an 8-bar chorus. There's lots of little kind of, not so much time changes, but, they added bars here, there, just to make it sort of a bit more interesting. I mean, he's very, very musical and he's just massively talented, so you kind of let him run with it. It was the same with Everybody Say Everybody Do. You just let him come up with stuff and you sort of add to it as best you can. So, I mean, he's a big part of 17, I have to say. And it's the same with Everybody Say Everybody Do. So, yeah, they draft people in to sort of co-write and see if you can come up with another gem, I suppose.
You shot the video for it out in San Francisco. Do you have any fond memories of that?
Yeah, I loved it. We spent quite a bit of time over there. There was a bit of traction with one of the radio stations. I think it was LA something. I can't actually remember the full title of the radio station, but quite a big pop radio station. And they started to play Crazy for You.
I wondered that if there was any talk to try and break that song in America.
Yeah, there was a bit of talk. I don't know why nothing ever, particularly happened. I mean, obviously we did the video there in Miami. We did a Top of the Pops while we were shooting 17. We did a Crazy for You Top of the Pops and other bits of press and some meetings and so on. And then someone at the time said, the radio station's picked up on this. So we kind of thought, this could work, we could maybe start touring out there. And because we'd done Australia and obviously all around Europe, and we had a lot of success in the Far East and Thailand. We had a lot of number ones in Thailand. Someone said to me the other day that we had about 5 or 6 number ones. And I was like, really? It's news to me. But no, America sort of eluded us, which is a shame because I loved it out there. But there's just something we had all the American crew. And it all felt very glamorous, really, really glamorous.
We spoke a lot about timing earlier, and I've heard you speak about the lead single from the follow-up album, Roller Coaster, Everybody Say Everybody Do, like I say, another Nick Kershaw collab that failed to make a splash, which blows my mind. Easily one of my favourite songs by anyone.
Really?
I fucking love that song. That must be tough when that happens, because great song, great video, the band looked cool as hell. It's like the first single from the new album, and then is that just radio not getting on board with it?
To be honest, my whole headspace at that point was elsewhere. So I think that started to filter through. I kind of regret that a bit because that might have had a bit of an influence on it, that I was gone, to be honest. She and I had really kind of had a lot of problems. My sort of character, I'm very, very oversensitive. I do know that as I've got older. I didn't realise how different we were as people. And that really kind of manifested itself as the years went by. So I think maybe the record company might have got whiff of the fact that I might have been off. Not that I was that important because they could have easily got another drummer and sort of cracked on. But, with record companies, if they don't think we've sold a big chunk of records, they can very, very quickly move on to whoever else, other artists that they've got. So, maybe it was too rocky. It was a bit too much of a step forward into sort of, rocky pop, whereas the other stuff was a lot poppier. Could have been a whole load of things, mate, and I don't know exactly. I try not to dwell on it.
Even now, I look at it, like everyone looks cool as hell.
I think it stands up, actually, doesn't it? I think if it was released now, I don't think it's very kind of 90s where you think, it's got that kind of real dated sort of, 90s feel to it. I think it kind of stands up, but sometimes for whatever reason, these things just don't happen.
I saw you guys live on that album. I think I'd seen you do a short set at Woollerton Park in Nottingham. I think that was some kind of roadshow thing. But then I saw a full set in Mansfield on the Roller Coaster tour, which I thought was incredible. I was like local crew for it. It was like a real rock show. What was the vibe at the band at that point? Was you excited to be out on tour, or was you already detached from it?
Oh, man, yeah, it was tough. So Rich and I were in sort of separate cars, separate hotel rooms. I mean, it really got silly, looking back, as I say, I take my part of the blame for it and being sort of maybe just too sensitive, but we were really having problems. So I didn't even want to do the tour. I was trying to get myself out of it. And I was talking to the management saying, you know what, this isn't working. It was making me ill, sadly. So it was a difficult time trying to get through it. There was one point where we were in the middle of the tour. We did something on top of an HMV in Birmingham or whatever, and I was so ill, I had a bucket next to me, because I was going to throw up. So it had taken its toll on me sort of physically.
Yeah, so you're not just like pissed off and like, I can't be arsed with this. It was like making you ill as well. Wow.
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah, it was really bad. Really, really bad. So in my mind, I thought, I've got to get out. I've got to stop because it's not worth your health. It's just not worth it.
How old was you at that time?
25, maybe.
Still a baby.
Yeah, still young. Yeah, probably not mature enough to, sort of think, hang on a minute, let's just put this in a box and put it in perspective. And it's not that important. But it was overwhelming, as I say, because I'm quite sensitive, I suppose. I just took it all way too seriously. And yeah, so I was elsewhere, unfortunately.
What did you miss most, even though you needed to leave? What did you miss most?
You know what? I hung around with the manager, Kim, for a little while. We're still close after all these years. And she was like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. I mean, she said, there's a blank bit of paper. You tell me what you want to do. And I honestly didn't know. And I thought, well, I'll just try other things. So I tried a bit of presenting and I tried a bit of acting. I was hopeless at all of that sort of stuff. And, it took me years to realise I am just a drummer. That's what I do. I'm okay at writing songs now. I've kind of learned a bit how to do that, a bit better than I was. But I'm a drummer and I can teach drums and that's my thing. It's taken me a long time to come to terms with that's what I do. But I suppose some of it was good. It really was. We got gold discs at Radio 1 road shows and played big gigs. And, there were times when it was fun and it was a dream come true as a kid. I used to lay in bed thinking I just want to be a pop star. That's all I want in life, and whatever else happens in life, I did manage to do that. I went on top of the Pops and I'd done it quite a few times after the band finished because I was a session drummer. So I went on with Cyndi Lauper and various other people, Russell Watson I played for, and there were aspects of it that were good. I'm not going to be negative about the whole thing.
And you're teaching drums now. When did you realise you was good at teaching?
I still don't know whether I am. I've not been fired, put it that way. Nobody's fired me yet. So I just sort of dipped my toe in because of the problems I've had I had a lot of problems at school and I sort of gravitate to people that feel a bit marginalised. I don't know what it is about it. I've got an affinity with them. So I'm always talking to people as much as I can that say things like they're struggling or they've got mental health problems or, autistic people with ADHD, because I recognise the struggle, I suppose. So I tried to sort of apply that to how drumming helped me when I was a kid, because, I was lost completely as a kid. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't really good at making friends. And I think that whole thing manifested itself also when I was in the band. The fact that I'm quite an insular sort of bloke. I'm not very good at interacting. I'm not very good at making loads of friends. I haven't got loads of friends. I've got a select few. So I recognise that in some other people. And I think drumming really helped me. And I thought, what if I can apply that to people that may not even know that? And then I dug deeper and I found out there's loads of studies that show how beneficial it is with people with autism and ADHD and depression and anxiety. So that's my main kind of thing now. I mean, not exclusively. I teach all sorts of people, but I really do enjoy people that have any kind of mental health issues and that, because I see the positive outcomes when they play the drums.
Oh, fantastic. Because you're doing that with our mutual friend, former Let Looser and outright lovely dude, Mr. Mark Danica.
He's amazing. Yeah, I love him. Yeah, no, I love him. He's been so good and so patient, with me.
Did he reach out to you or did you hear what he was doing?
No, the opposite. I was trying to get into it and I thought, I don't know what to do. I actually don't know how to do this. I set up my own little web page and I, put the feelers out to try and get some clients. And I noticed that he was after a drum teacher. So kind of, with a lot of hesitation, I sort of buzzed him and I said, look, this is what I kind of want to dip my toe into. Can you help? And he was just amazing. He really was. He kind of just scooped me up and said, come hither into my studio, and gave me a couple of students. And I was just really kind of crapping it, thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be any good at this. And a year later, I'm still doing it, and he's been so supportive. I just love the bones of the bloke. He's a lovely, lovely bloke. He really is.
Through all those years playing alongside all the other pop stars of the day, being on all the chat shows, going to parties, other than Kim Wilde and Jane Seymour, who did you all fancy?
Elle Macpherson. We did Des O'Connor, and she was in the dressing room in the makeup chair, just looking like an absolute goddess. So we were all like, oh my God, that's Elle Macpherson. She was huge at the time. I mean, she's still famous, isn't she? But she was the sort of it girl at the time. And she was incredibly tall, especially with her heels on. We were looking up at her like that. So that was amazing.
Did anyone try and sweet talk her? Any chat-up lines?
No, you're joking. We were just like, oh my God, it's Elle Macpherson. Yeah, she's just incredible.
So last question, I want you to time travel a little to a Friday night in the late 80s or early 90s and you head into the video store. What movie soundtrack do you have on the Walkman and what 3 videos are you going to rent for the weekend?
Oh my, Star Wars, probably. Well, hang on, Star Wars was late 70s, those early ones, right?
We're so far behind in the UK, it probably didn't get released on video till about 80 or 81.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, my kids actually got me more into Star Wars. I kind of watched bits and pieces and sort of enjoyed all that sort of stuff, but they really were into it. My son, Elliot, who's 21 now, so he loves it. The Walkman's a good one. Well, I suppose there's the standard, the Footloose and things like that. I mean, it's just a massive part of me sort of growing up.
You know what? Footloose is a very underrated film.
Yeah, definitely. I never got into Dirty Dancing or anything like that. I never, ever latched onto that. I suppose it would have been more like the horror movies that I was into. Maybe that says a lot about my personality. I don't know.
I'll take Footloose as one of the tapes you rent and the soundtrack as well, because the soundtrack, I watched it a few months ago. I was like, damn, this is great.
Really good. The songs are amazing. Yeah. I mean, the Walkman, to be honest, mate, if you're going back to the 80s, it would have been really it'd have been The Cure, it'd have been Newman, loads of Newman. I was very blinkered with Newman, but then he was starting to sort of do stuff that I wasn't as keen on through the 80s. So it would have been early 80s, would have been Newman, and then it would have been Human League. Loved the Human League, loved Dare, loved all their stuff. And I told him once as well, I met Phil Oakey in Germany, and I got up the courage to go up to him and say, I've admired you for years. And he went, oh, thanks very much. He's this enormous, great big guy. So I loved all the Human League. So that would have all been on the Walkman, definitely.
Well, Phil Oakey, Electric Dreams, one of my all-time favourite soundtrack songs.
Oh, man. Yeah, I should have said that one.
That's where Crazy Few's on a par with, where them notes come on at the beginning. It's instant.
Yeah, that's really iconic, isn't it? Da, da, da. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I remember a girl dumped me when I was really young. I had their album and I was just listening to it. So at the moment, that is really synonymous with me being dumped by this girl, one of their tunes. But I still love them. I still love the Human League.
Lee, thank you for that. That was wicked. I love that.
Before I waffle, I do have a terrible habit of just like going off on a tangent.
Makes it much easier for me.
Good. I really enjoyed it, mate. Really enjoyed it.
Big thanks to Lee Murray of Let Loose for spending some time chatting with me on today's Straight to Video podcast. Really loved hearing about the early days of the band, and I'm stoked that those songs are still going to be out there played live 30 years after we all first heard them. Be sure to check out letlooseofficial.com for all up-to-date info, because there's lots of stuff happening for them right now, and hit up Lee himself at leedrumhub.com. There's a few things happening over at the 80s Video Shop during December and heading towards Christmas, so please check out all our events on all the main social channels, simply under 80s Video Shop, or head on over to 80svideoshop.co.uk to pick up tickets, and we have some merch on sale right now too. So that's all for this episode, but I'll be back next Friday, hopefully with my voice back on track. So until then, always be kind, please rewind and unwind, and I'll speak to you all real soon.